My mom set the Thanksgiving table for everyone but me. 7 years later, my sister finally understood why. My name is Myra O'Neill, and I'm 34 years old. Last Thanksgiving at noon, I stood in a warehouse in Columbus, Ohio, watching 300 people find their seats at the longest dinner table this city has ever set. Then, the door opened. My mother walked in. My sister came in right behind her. Phone already up and recording, and a room full of laughter went quiet row by row like someone turning down a dial. 7 years earlier, my family left my Thanksgiving dinner on a paper plate on the front porch. My mother texted me that I wasn't clean enough to eat inside. I ate alone in my car at the end of their street. And then I drove out of their lives. What my mother did next in that warehouse in front of 300 witnesses is the reason I'm telling this story. But here's what none of them knew when they walked through my door. And it's bigger than the building they were standing in. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people finally get loud in their own way. If you've ever been made to feel like you weren't enough for your own family's table, this story is for you. Drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. To understand that silence in the warehouse, you have to go back 7 years to a small town called Hartwell and the smell of bleach on my hands. 7 years ago, I was 27 and I lived in a rented room above Kessler's laundromat on Main Street in Hartwell, Ohio. The rent was cheap. The dryers ran until 10. My whole apartment smelled like warm lint, which honestly beat the alternative because I spent my days smelling like industrial bleach. I worked housekeeping at the Hartwell Motor in 6 o'clock till 2 o'clock. And after that, I cleaned private houses around town until dark. Doctors' houses, teachers' houses, the kind of houses my mother pointed at from the car when I was a kid. My hands were cracked at every knuckle. I kept a tub of hardware store salve in my glove box and a pair of church gloves for occasions, and I can tell you which one got more use. People hear cleaner and think of a mop. They don't think about the chemistry of it, the systems, the way a good cleaner walks into chaos and leaves order behind. I loved it. I was good at it. And I had a plan, written on a folded index card in my wallet, a company of my own someday, with my name on the paperwork and real wages for real work. I'd already picked the name. I used to say it out loud while I scrubbed grout, like a prayer with rubber gloves on. That November, I was pulling doubles because the motor inn was short-staffed, and I was saving every tip in a coffee can I couldn't afford to touch. 2 days before Thanksgiving, my phone rang while I was flipping a mattress in room 11. My mother's voice came through crisp as a starched collar. She said dinner was at 2 o'clock sharp, that Danielle was making it a classy year, and then, before she hung up, she said the thing she always said to me, "Don't embarrass me." She didn't say goodbye. Mothers like mine never do. They just leave you holding the tone. You need to see my mother's kitchen to understand my mother. I stopped by that Sunday before the holiday to drop off pie pumpkins from the farm stand, because that was my job in the family, useful, invisible, and gone by dessert. Carol O'Neill ran her kitchen like a museum with a strict docent. My sister Danielle rinsed a glass and set it in the rack, and my mother picked it up, held it to the window, and washed it again without a word. That was the whole relationship, right there, in one wet glass. My mother grew up as the daughter of a school janitor, and the kids at Hartwell High called her the janitor's kid for 4 straight years. She told that story like a medal she'd won in a war she was still fighting. She'd married my father, Walt, a parts manager with a steady check and a quiet spine, and she had spent 30 years scrubbing the smell of poverty off our family name. Danielle had married into a catering-adjacent business and a brick house with columns, which made her the good news. I emptied wastebaskets at a motel, which made me the weather. Disgusted, endured, blamed. That Sunday, Danielle was spreading fan decks of cardstock across the counter, announcing that this year's dinner would be elegant, adults only at the main table, cloth napkins, the works. My mother nodded along and said she'd ordered place cards. Place cards for a family dinner of 10. My father looked up from the sports page, looked at the cardstock, and looked back down. That was his vote. I remember thinking place cards were a strange thing to need for people who all shared a last name. I remember wondering, just for a second, whose names would be on them. Then I let it go, because letting it go was the chore I'd done longest. I should have counted the cards. Thanksgiving morning, Rhonda quit. She was the other housekeeper on the holiday rotation at the Motor Inn, and at 9:15, she walked into the supply room, hung up her apron, and said her sister in Dayton had a spare couch with her name on it. I don't blame her. But that left 14 checkout rooms, a full linen turnover, and one me. I had planned this day like a wedding. I'd traded shifts to be done by noon. I had a garment bag hanging in my car with a clean sweater, good jeans, and the gloves, so I could walk into my mother's house looking like a daughter instead of a shift worker. Instead, I stripped beds until my forearms burned. At 11 o'clock, I texted my mother. Running late. Coming straight from my shift. Save me a seat. The message flipped to read almost instantly. No reply. I told myself she was basting the turkey. At 1:30, I clocked out. Still in uniform. Hair flattened. Smelling like a hospital hallway. And I had a choice. 20 minutes to shower at my place and be late. Or drive straight over and be almost on time. My family kept score with clocks. Not with clothes. Or so I thought. So I chose the clock. I drove across town with the windows cracked in November, trying to air the bleach out of my collar. I rehearsed my apology at every stoplight. Sorry I'm late. Rhonda quit. 14 rooms. You'd have done the same. At 2:40, I turned onto Birchwood Lane and saw every car already in the driveway. Danielle's SUV. My aunt's Buick. My uncle's truck with the dealer plates my father got him. The dining room window glowed gold. I saw the curtain move. Just once. The way a curtain moves when someone lets it go fast. I parked at the curb, grabbed the garment bag out of habit, and walked up the path to the front door. The storm door was locked. The front door behind it was shut. And the porch light was on at 2:40 in the afternoon, which is its own kind of message. I rang the bell and heard it chime through the walls. Heard chairs. Heard my aunt's laugh. Heard silverware. And heard nobody move toward the door. I rang again. Nothing. Then I looked down. On the top step, centered like it had been staged for a photograph, sat a paper plate covered in foil. My name was written across the foil in black marker. All capital letters. Myra. Under the foil there was turkey. A scoop of stuffing. Green beans laid straight as pencils. And a dinner roll with a pat of butter already going stiff in the cold. Whoever made that plate had taken care with it. That was the part that hollowed me out. I stood on my mother's porch holding a warm plate with my name on it while my family ate on the other side of a locked door. My phone buzzed in my jacket. A text from my mother, and I can still see the shape of it on the screen. You can eat on the porch. You're not clean enough for the table. I looked through the gap in the dining room curtains because I couldn't help it. The table was set with cloth napkins and Danielle's place cards, little white tents in front of every chair. 8 cards. 8 chairs. 8 people. Seated. Eating. Warm. I counted twice. There had never been a 9th chair. Whatever I had been to this family that morning, the table had been telling the truth about it since before the turkey went in the oven. One more thing snagged in my mind, though it took years to matter. The handwriting on the foil. My mother writes in small slanted cursive, tight as barbed wire. The letters on my plate were big, round and careful with a long tail on the A. It wasn't her hand. I was too busy breaking to wonder whose it was. I picked up the plate, walked back down the path and got in my car. I drove to the end of Birchwood Lane and parked under the big sycamore because I didn't trust myself at the wheel and I didn't want them watching me sit there. I peeled back the foil and balanced my Thanksgiving on the steering wheel. The turkey was still warm. Somehow that made it worse. Eating a warm meal made by hands that wouldn't open a door. I managed 3 bites. I sat there in my uniform with the engine ticking and my name on a piece of foil in my lap. And I did the math a person should never have to do. How many holidays? How many casseroles carried in through that door? How many times I'd cleaned that very house top to bottom before parties, so my mother could tell her friends she'd been scrubbing all week. A tap on the passenger window nearly sent the green beans into the dash. It was Mrs. Gaines from 2 doors down, 70-something, walking her old beagle in a Christmas red coat a month early. She looked at me, looked at the plate, looked back at the glowing gold window up the street. "Honey," she said through the glass, "is that your dinner?" I smiled the smile you learn in service work, the one that keeps tips coming and questions away. Just heading out, I told her. Big family, small table. She stood there a second longer than politeness required, and her face